Once, perhaps rashly, a king's son rode off into the great, great desert. Hunting, he said, I'm hunting lions. But he had ridden off too hastily, or else he rode too far, because soon he realized he was deep in the sand dune sea, and his water was failing. The sun beat down. He started to go home, but the dust blew up, and his throat was parched. He looked around, looking for those birds that fly where water was. He saw none. He looked for signs of people, and there were none. He looked for any trace of green, and there, right on the rocky hills, some way off, he could see almost a tree, he thought. He went over dune and dune and dune, fearing it was only mirage. But at last, in a little valley, he came across a well. And he looked down the well, and there was no cup or bucket or any way to get the water. And he collapsed. Sometime later, a Bedouin, a woman, came to the well. She looked at the man and tut-tutted, and she took out a bucket. But in that bucket she only took the smallest amount of water, and this she mixed with salt from her belt. Here. And she woke up the prince and gave him a single teaspoon of water. And he said, more. And she smiled and said, no, wait. And she waited for 10 minutes. And then she did the same, but this time she gave him 2 spoonfuls of salty water. And so it went on as the hot day passed into evening. And by the end of the afternoon and the start of the evening, as the shadows lengthened, she finally gave him a bucket to drink. And he drank it deeply and greedily. And then he turned to her and said, why, you're a one. Why didn't you just give me a bucket of water and be done with it? And she smiled and said, I am a daughter of the wild, fierce desert. Yes, I know, a Bedouin. We know that life can kill if it comes back too quickly. And so I tell you, if I had given you water as you wanted it, you would have died. And the prince looked surprised, and then he nodded. Do you live around here? And she smiled and said, my father's tent is close at hand. And so it was, the prince was taken to where he had never been before, a Bedouin's tent. And the tent was far more luxurious than he dreamt it would ever be. And it was full of carpets, beautiful, luxurious carpets. And he drank sweet, hot mint tea with a girl who said her name was Aniat, and her father. And he turned at last and said, are you very wealthy? Where do all these carpets come from? They must be worth a fortune, a king's ransom nearly. And Aniat smiled and said, I make them. We sell them. Ah, said the prince. Maybe I should buy some. And she smiled and said, maybe. Well, the next day he rode home. And his father was delighted to see him, but shocked with his story how he had spent a night with the desert people, the Bedouin. For we all know about them. And shocked even more when at the end of a week the prince said, I won't marry anyone except Aniat, the princess of Bedouin. and the king asked his counsellor, and the two of them agreed that what they needed to do was to go and humiliate the Bedouin in public, and that the prince, who was a wise enough chap, would realise that Bedouin aren't quite one of us. And so they took the prince off, and they rode into the desert, and found at last the great carpet maker. And even the king himself, my, was impressed by Aniat and her carpets, and the mint tea, and the sweet cinnamon cakes, and so he forgot it was meant to be humiliating the Bedouin. And he looked at his son and said, well, she's not a princess, but I suppose she would bring the loyalty of the people of the desert. And seeing that, the prince needed no encouragement. He proposed in front of his father and her father to Aniat at the end of the night. And Aniat said, no, I won't marry you. Of course not. Don't be so silly. Why, don't you like me at all? I think I could very easily be in love with you. But that's not the point. We Bedouin women do not choose any riff-raff to be our husband. Look, I am a prince. I know you saw me down on an upper, but I'm not a riff-raff. And she smiled and said, why? What skill do you have? Well, I could hunt lions. That is not a practical skill. And you can't hunt them, not without your equerries and your arrow makers. But I can rule justly. That remains to be seen. Although I do not doubt your justice, but it is not a practical skill. What practical skill do you have? What sort of thing do you mean? Well, I swore to myself I would never marry anyone who did not have a skill to match my own. A carpet weaver, an instrument maker, even possibly a chef. Some great practical talent that when all else fails could earn you a living. I have no such skill. Then I cannot marry you. Could I learn such a skill? Yes. It is a little late, but maybe. And then the prince looked at her carpets, and he realized there was nothing he would rather make in the world. And he said, but perhaps you could show me how to make carpets. She smiled and said, all right. It will take 3 months or more, and it's hard work. You will have to be an apprentice and get up before the sun. I will do it. And so it was the Bedouin came, and they pitched near the palace. And every morning before the sun rose, the prince would go to the tent of Aniat. No, it's like that. You put diamonds with silk. Diamonds, I tell you. And with some patience and occasional bouts of ill temper, she gradually taught him to weave carpets. And he was a skilled man. And he wished to learn like nothing else. And at the end of 3 months he had produced such a carpet that even the guild of carpet weavers of another kingdom merited it. That was my test, said Aniat. If I could sell them in the bazaars, not just of this land, but of the next, I will marry you. And so it was. They were married. To great celebration and jubilation amongst most of the people. Although some muttered, she's a Bedouin. No good will come of this, because we all know about that sort of people. Well, the years passed. The old king died. And his son, and Aniat, became king and queen. And for 5 years or more, they ruled justly and well. And almost everyone forgot that she had once been a daughter of the desert. And then it began. But what did people expect if you married a Bedouin? How far in the north, around the Red Rock City, caravans started to disappear. Men muttered that things flew in the night, that things weren't right. They locked their doors up there in the Red Rock City, and the fear of the dark started to spread like a slow panic on the kingdom. Men muttered that rules weren't worth following if the king could not keep his own. Outlaws became more numerous, murders more frequent, and always there was the terror of the dark, a fierce terror that no flame could extinguish, and that no man could not listen to. And even in the capital city, in the king's own castle, by night, taken by who knows what power, men started to disappear. So one day the king came to Aniat and his grand vizier, the same as his father had, and said, "This is no good. I must find the source of this evil. I have asked the geographers and the wisest, and they say it began up there in the Red Rocks, beyond the northernmost city. I shall take then a host with me. We will ride into the desert. I will be armed with silver, for this is evil, and I counsel you both the same. And I will ride and I will find whatever it is that is damning us. And you, Aniat, will be my queen while I am gone, and rule as I would. I trust you." "When are you going?" said Aniat, with fear in her voice. "Well, the dark is always more powerful in the dark of the moon. That's next week. So I will ride tonight." And so it was the king, with a large part of his host, rode north. North beyond the Red Rock City, north to the land of crag and darkness. And they rode off. And suddenly, in the dark of the moon, although they had sentries everywhere, they were taken. Quiet, invisible hands seemed to clutch their mouths and grab their hair and hold their swords down. And they found themselves part dragged, part kicked high into the red rocks by a great door that seemed to open on the dark of the moon to the wide lands beyond. And down and down and down they went, going through ever galleries that was filled with that smell, that horrible smell of roasting fat, filled with fire, filled with flame, filled with the screams of distant torture. Until at last they saw before them a great fire, dancing in the rocks of the road that they were taking, and came to a great cavern. And in that cavern there were bronze pots full of men roasting, some not as dead as they could be. And they were full of bones that were being polished into ivory by 1,000 hands. They were full of teeth that were being made into weapons, arrowheads. They were filled with stolen treasure and jewels. And as they stood blinking in the firelight after the long dark, a figure, dark, came up to them and said, "Tell me why I should not have you taken and put in my fires, put in the pot, boiled down for soap, and your meat sold in the open market. Tell me what you can give me that is worth more than your bones bones for glue, your fat for soap, your skin for meat, your teeth for weapons. Tell me." And the dark figure with eyes that lit up, white and terrible, started to pinch the prince and his men and examine them and lick his cruel lips and sharp teeth. And the prince, the king, said, "Well, I'll tell you why. If you open your treasures and give me your jewels, I can make you, in 3 months, a carpet that is worth the ransom of a king. The queen of the lands to the south will make you rich beyond even your wildest dreams, if you only let me." And the creature said, "All of you? Must I keep all of you alive?" "Yes, I will eat us all." "All right, but if any one of you shirks, you will all be melted alive." And the ghoul led them to a cavern, and the prince had them set up looms. And then all his men said, "But we can't do this. We have never weaved a design, never weaved a carpet." And the prince, the king, said, "Well, you will learn. You will learn." And so it was. He taught them what Aniat had taught him so long before, how to lay the lines and start the design. And always in the design he would go around like a termagant, like the ghoul himself. "No, you put that bit of red thread the wrong side of the blue. No, the diamond goes there. No, the diamond goes there. No, that must be an emerald." As if in the design, something truthful, some truth was hidden. And occasionally the ghoul would come and he would look at it speculatively. "Doesn't look much to me. Seems to be keeping all of you alive for very little gain." But as the carpet grew, he grew more and more gloating. "Well, this is a pretty thing. I can see that this isn't worth the ransom of an emperor, let alone a king." And at last, after 3 months, the design was done. And the ghoul said, "All right, well, I'll keep you alive another night. But I warn you, if this is not worth a prince's ransom, a king's ransom, an emperor's ransom, I really will boil you all alive." And the ghoul took the carpet and disappeared. Well, in the kingdom, Aniat had ruled as best she could, but men openly rebelled and muttered, "You can't follow a Bedouin. This was all her doing. She's done away with the prince, I tell you. Done away with him." And there was tumult and discord. For 3 months it lasted, and all the time she and those that would follow her wore silver swords at their side, and men thought, "We told you, Bedouin are fascists." But Aniat ruled as well as she could, as justly as she could. At the end of the 3 months, at the dark of the moon, men said someone, or perhaps something, was demanding to see her. And a great figure was led into the palace, and it stalked in, its face hidden by a dark cloak, and all you could see piercing cold white eyes, and its hands seemed to be more of bone than skin. And at last it turned to Aniat and said, "I have here a design on a carpet that I have been told is worth a king's ransom. What is it worth?" And he laid down the carpet that her husband had made, And Aniat looked at it, and looked at it again. Carefully she studied it. "Well," said the ghoul, "what is it worth, my dear?" reaching out as if to catch her. And Aniat suddenly stood up and said, "I'll tell you what it's worth. It's worth more than a king's ransom. It's worth more than the price of an emperor. I'll tell you what it's worth." And she drew quickly, before anyone could see what she had done, a silver scimitar. And with that scimitar struck the ghoul's head off there and then. And he fell, dead. Struck by a silver that had been blessed in the days of the prophet himself. And the Vizir said, "Why have you done that? I agree the man was creepy, but why?" "Look at him," said Aniat. "He is melting as you speak. He is a ghoul. Pull together our army, our greatest host. We're going to ride to the Red Rocks. In the dark of the moon we'll come there. Still, if we ride at once." And so saying, she pulled together as many men as she could and rode hard, for she needed to get there before sun rose. And as the sun began to rise, and its red light filled the land, she saw the door in the Red Rocks, and rode straight into the mouths of hell. And then her and her host went through all those caverns, releasing the men, killing the ghouls that were left there. And the red light from above, from the rising sun, filled the caverns with a light like blood, like revenge. And Aniat and the king met and embraced and laughed. And the Vizier said, "Well, you've done it. But how?" And the king said, "Have you not heard? The Bedouin can write with their carpets." "What?" said the Vizier. And Aniat said, "It was all written in the carpet. Did he not say it'd be worth a king's ransom? And did I not tell you," she said, turning at last to her husband, "that I would teach you a skill that one day would save your life?" And so Aniat and the king rode home, and all men remarked on the wisdom of the Bedouin.